We are welcoming everyone today for a wonderful evening with Crystal Miller and Miles Adcox. We are thrilled to have both of them. I want to introduce you to Crystal. By the way, I got to meet her. We had a screening at the Anschutz Foundation here in Colorado, and I knew somebody who had been in the Columbine tragedy was going to be in attendance. And on the way there, I thought, oh my goodness, what if that person is in our movie? Because we have some news clips. And all of a sudden I thought, what if the person doesn't like it? And then I just had a piece that saying, whatever it is, it's okay. And then we went to that screening. And then that evening after the screening, I got a beautiful email from Crystal Miller, a person who advocates for others and advocates for hope and for faith and for goodness and for families. And she was not just present at the screening, but she is in the movie. Let's watch the clip that she saw herself for the first time while watching American Tragedy.
After he died, I woke up remembering that day of how this child was going to bring me sorrow.
I got under the desk and then they just started coming in the library and opening fire and shooting off bombs on so many people.
We were getting word that Leawood Elementary School is locked down.
If you were just joining us, two young men apparently dressed in long black trench coats opened fire about an hour and a half ago at a high school just outside of Denver in Littleton, Colorado. At least 3 students have been injured and possibly as many as 8. We know that victims have been taken to area hospitals. 1 student has apparently been critically injured, and we know that one of the victims may be an adult woman. There is a huge presence of police and sheriff's deputies.
That was the first time I had been introduced to Crystal Miller, was when she emailed me, and she is the person who's saying so many people. And then we went to a park, she and I, and she brought her children and I brought my grandchildren, and we just talked. And as I talked with her, I felt like she was like a daughter, just lovable and good and desirous to do whatever she can. Then I read her beautiful book, Marked for Life, and read how she has gone around the international world after mass trauma, comforting people and giving people hope, because she truly understands what it means to be in a very traumatic experience. So Crystal, we are honored and privileged and grateful that we get to welcome you here. And can you give the audience a response to the movie American Tragedy?
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you so much, Lisa, for having me here and for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. And I truly do believe that this is one of the most important conversations of our time. Now more than ever, we need to be talking about everything that you present in American Tragedy. And, you know, even as we talk about this importance of not just mental health, but mental fitness. In the past, the movie also describes how there has been this huge push towards physical health and physical fitness. And I believe now is the time to create a large-scale initiative to really understand not just mental health, but again, mental fitness. All of the resources, all of the money, all of the energy that is spent really putting that towards physical fitness. It's time to really focus in on this, what I believe to be an even more important message, this understanding of holistic wellness, mind, mind, soul, body, emotions, spirit, and really how we can begin to implement those at a young age, how we can begin to teach young people grounding techniques, resiliency, social emotional learning programs, breathing techniques. All of these things are so vitally important. And I believe the benefits of doing so will be so innumerable. They will be exponential. But I also believe the cost in not doing so will be detrimental to my kids, to their kids, for generations to come. And I believe that now is the time for change. And I'm only responsible for me. I can change me. I can change what I'm doing here in my house and in my sphere of influence. But I want to use my voice, my platform, whatever that may be, to start seeking change. And I really do believe that the ripple effect that we will begin to see will be such a positive one. And I know that sometimes even watching a film like this can feel overwhelming. It can feel like this is such a huge issue. Where do we even begin? What do we even begin to do? But I think that it's actually more simple. I think that the practicality of it is within our reach, that it can be taught by coaches. It can be taught by doctors to young parents. It can be taught by teachers in schools. And I think, maybe the fear might be, well, won't that interfere with academia? And my answer to that is truly no, not at all. In fact, we see research shows that it will bolster, it will only increase the benefits of the academic environment for these children. And I'm no expert, and I'm learning right along with everybody else. But as I'm learning my breathing techniques, I'm right there teaching my own kids. I'm teaching them how to do daily. We're implementing the star breathing that you show in the film, other deep breathing techniques. I'm really always trying to help my kids find language for their emotions, to let them know those emotions are okay. It's okay to feel those things. Let's express those. Let's find ways to express those. We also have at our house a box. We call it a calm down box. And so every time my children's emotions start to get elevated, I pull out the box, and it's things you can squeeze and pull and hold and twist and turn and concentrate on so that they can reset their little minds and go back to whatever it is they were doing. And even recently, I've started to implement in my own home kind of the basic concept, the practices of filial therapy, which is basically child-led play therapy. So 30 minutes each week I spend with each of my kids, allowing them to really lead the playtime and just learn a lot through the process with my kids. And again, I'm no expert. I've got a long way to go, but these are some of the ways we're starting to implement that, because again, I think that this is the most important thing that we can be teaching our young people. And it's such an important conversation and message. So thank you for the challenge personally. And I hope so many more feel that, that same excitement when really starting to learn how to implement it in their own lives, their own families.
Thank you, Crystal. And that's exactly what I feel about a grandma. I feel like this is a second chance. I can start teaching my grandkids resiliency, how to deal with failure, how to talk when they feel like they can't do something. I have a grandson who says, I can't. And I say, well, I can't yet, but I bet if you keep trying, you'll be able to. And I'm constantly learning what I can do to help those in my sphere to have a better kind of neural pathways, more positive neural pathways. And it's exciting because it's doable. We can do it. We can make our children have a more vibrant life by teaching them early on and consistently and constantly through all the 12 years of school. And if we do that, life will be different and so much more vibrant. Thank you. Thank you. And Miles, I know we have you there. I can't see you right now, but can you hear us?
I can hear you well. Can you not? I see all of you, but you don't see me on video.
No,
eh?
I see you now. I see you now.
Good.
And Miles, we are so honored to have you. I spent this afternoon listening to interviews of people that interviewed you or you interviewed people. And I know that you have a wealth of experience of international speaking, of working with famous people. And what I saw was a person who listened really well and responded with validation and got to the core of not just the question, but the desires. And I love the differentiation between the need and the deserve, what you deserve. And the idea of culture, of a community, of what you work. And I just left with hope of a better tomorrow and even a better today. So Miles, thank you.
Wow,
And
thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate that. That's a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
so we would love to have your reaction to American Tragedy.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here as well. I think pretty much Crystal is turned into a friend and an advocate and a voice that I trust and willing to follow, particularly in spaces like this that are incredibly important. And so, Crystal, thank you for making this introduction and for just continuing to follow your heart and make good things happen. And I apologize for the lighting and the casual attire. I'm actually here. I wish you could get, there you go. That's where I am.
Beautiful.
Little family vacation down at the lake. So I'm not going to have as much time as I'd like tonight, but just value the time that I have here. And particularly, even more so, I'm here because of the conversation and I'm here because of Crystal, but boy, I'm really here now because of what you all have created in this beautiful project, in this film. I watched it today. I was hopeful to get a chance to prior to that, but just schedules do what schedules do over the last week or so since I was invited to be a part of this. And but I'm kind of glad I watched it today because I don't just walk away with some important statistics or sound bites or maybe things that I picked up that I thought were of value in watching a film or a document. I walk away feeling it. I felt it. And that is the torch that I carry as it relates to emotional and mental wellness and the importance I picked up when I got on here that you guys were already into the social and emotional learning component of prevention around kids, which I'm a huge advocate of. That was such a beautiful surprise in the film. I did not know that was where it was going, but when I caught a theme early on, I was like, wow, they mentioned something not only I'm passionate about, but I think is pivotal in this whole conversation. And then you just really spend a lot of time on it. So it felt, I felt and a lot of times when I think when people cover tragic stories like this, you kind of, I see people, not intentionally, I'm sure, but kind of stay out of the deep end in a sense of hoping that, well, I often think it's just people aren't real comfortable being uncomfortable. And but this conversation, I think there needs to be some tension and we need to feel the discomfort of the reality of it and the weight of the reality of it. But I think we have to balance that with such, which I think you did, with hope and a solution. So I'm a fan of the film. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm excited to tell people about it because I think it tells a story not only that I'm passionate about as an advocate and a supporter of trying to help in the same way that you guys are, make the world safer. I love the closing line of the whole film. That was just powerful. But there's a lot I could say about it. Probably I didn't expect. When I talked to Crystal originally, I thought she kind of wanted to hear some things that are important to me about providing hope and how we might change the narrative around mental health. I'm happy to share those, but I could honestly talk for 30 minutes about the work that you put together because I hope you feel proud of it because you should. It tells a great story, and I think it's an important and timely message. So well done.
Well, thank you. And Josh, my son, is the director, and I'm very proud of him. We would love to hear you teach us anything, and we know you have to leave early. What the movie is meant to do is open up the conversation, not be an end to the conversation. This is a movie that presents the complexity of the situation and the absolute necessity of starting early and consistently for mental health and mental wellness, or what we call brain fitness, and what you call is mental fitness. Tell us what you're doing and get us excited about the hope that you have.
Well, it's a hopeful conversation. I got to tell you, I've been in this space, the mental health space, for a little over a couple decades, and I've never felt such a weight of responsibility as I do now, because I am someone who in our space feels responsible for outcomes that we provide, and I'm not satisfied with them. I think as mental health professionals, if we're not asking questions about how to not just we individually become better practitioners, but how do we collectively become more unified as an offering and as a solution to, frankly, and the greatest epidemic I think we've seen in a long time. But this epidemic is outpacing the solution, meaning us, 3-1. And I think that's a wake up call that we've got to pay attention to, maybe even more. And that's where I think it starts. Is I don't want to put a microscope on. I think I did that early in my career. I put a microscope on culture, and it was like, if they would just get it, there's such a stigma out there. But what I kind of failed to do in those early formative years was put a mirror back on me and my industry and say, what's our part in creating some of the stigma we complain about? And I feel like I'm not picking on our field, because I think mental health professionals are heroes in my mind. Those that step into this work are usually called to it, and it comes with a weight and a responsibility, unlike a lot of fields. And so I'm excited, but just as I feel the weight of the problem, because it, particularly right now, because, loneliness rates have doubled in the last 50 years. And we weren't exactly in a mental health utopia pre-pandemic, but what we're going to see on the heels of this thing is something unlike anything I think we've experienced. And I think we have to unify, elevate the voices around this thing and come together. So just as I said, I feel the weight of this thing in my space. I have never felt more excited about the possibilities of what we can do to help shift and shape culture, to help change the conversation. And I think we've never been positioned better. And I think the paradigm is beginning to shift. I'm seeing it. It used to, when I would go to people and talk about mental health, it was pushing a snowball up a hill to get people to listen outside of our space. And I was always trying to be clever about, how do I not pathologize the language and make it cool and hip and find a way to craft it and communicate it so people will care. And now I find people are listening. People want to know in corporate spaces and leadership circles. People want to know about mental health. I don't think we can afford not to care anymore, but because this next generation is going to kind of force us into paying attention, I'm seeing people start to pay attention. And to me, that's hopeful and is exciting, because for too long, I think we as an industry have sat back and waited on culture to come to us when they needed us. And I think now more than ever, it's our turn to step into culture and meet it where it is and help change this conversation. And the way we do that, I believe, is by creating partnerships and relationships with people like you. Was it Josh? Is that right? That direct?
Yes, Josh.
Yeah.
And
Josh,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know your background, but if you're a creative who's putting good things out through the lens of media, then I want to be your friend, particularly because you're talking about a subject that means something to me. And I know it matters, but I think for a long time, we've kind of had we didn't play well with media. And we would box in our information, I think, and overcook anonymity to the point where it created the shame that we didn't want people to feel and wanted them to reach out and talk about it. So I'm talking to a lot of people right now, I'm excited to say, in the media, that are saying, how can we help change the narrative? How can we help create a new conversation? And I'm all in for that. I think it takes more than people who claim or those of us that have done the education and have the credentials and the experience. We're needed. We're in the trenches, but we also need people like you that can help us tell a better story, because the story that is waiting to be told is not one of tragedy. It's one of hope, and it's one of beauty. I can tell you that. And I think now more than ever, we have the best opportunity of our time to start bringing healing and hope into humanity.
That is so wonderful. And I do know that the paradigm is being shifted. We realize if we are constantly on a therapeutic basis, we will always be behind the 8 ball. We will never get ahead. We have got to say, hey, we cannot just wait for therapy to happen. We have got to start before there's ever a problem and teach the basic skills of living a vibrant, healthy, connected, compassionate life. And those are things we can teach each other, and kids can learn. They can learn in the home, or if they're not in the home, in the schools. It can happen, and it needs to happen. I love your vision and your hope and your work. Well done. And I'm excited for all that you're doing. You're involved in podcasts, and you're involved in the trauma, and you're involved in Onsite. And it's just like amazing, all the things you're involved in, and you're involved with your family. And I'm glad that you're on a vacation with them right now. I know you have to leave. Do you want to say anything before you leave?
Yeah, I'll mention what, Crystal, I hope you can take some time and talk a little bit more about, which is why we're in this conversation. I mean, now, granted, I'm in it because I'm a mental health professional, and this certainly fits, but more specifically to this conversation, when I got into this space, and I didn't get into it by accident, I got into it by the lens of my own experience. I was someone who felt some despair and some hopelessness and some challenge and depression and anxiety. And so I don't know who our listeners are tonight or who might watch this after, but if you're a parent or a professional or someone who might have a big question about, does any of this stuff fit for me? I've been on the professional side of this for a long time, but this is deeply personal to me because I got to experience a life transformation by speaking up and having the right people come around me at the right time so that I could have a lights coming on experience. And now I know, looking back, that pursuing this way of life, becoming more emotional, intelligent, and well, was not what was wrong with me. It was 100% what was right with me. And so if you're sitting there today and you're feeling scared or hopeless about speaking up or about how to parent or how to lead in this time, I would encourage you to make this a part of your lifestyle, not just a part of something you want to educate people with, because people don't heal what they don't feel. And I have learned that in running a facility, and several facilities in the treatment space, is I wanted the organizational health of the culture to match the service we provided. And that is a big task because backstage, it doesn't always match what's out front. And I used to try to say, we got to practice what we preach and do self-care and resolve our own trauma, because many of us got into this space through the lens of our own unresolved trauma. And it can make us really good practitioners if we know about it and we're willing to resolve it and reconcile it. But I wanted to be a part of a place where people did their own work. And I hope that's what I can encourage from anybody that cares about this conversation enough to watch it tonight, is that start with you. And it will be the most rewarding experience of your life. And at that point, it makes teaching it so easy because people can feel it. And you don't even have to teach it because they're going to see the way you're living and want to live into it. But why I'm here is because on the tragic day that Crystal experienced and Dylan experienced and many others, I had a friend that was there, Austin Eubanks. And I didn't know him then, but I got to know him when he got into our field. And he was an important friendship for me and a relationship for me. And I say was because he's not with us anymore. He died tragically. And I think that losing him got my attention. That was up close and personal because he was someone who had overcome a lot of what he experienced on that horrific day and was putting his voice to use in a beautiful way. And he was an advocate, and he was an up and comer in the addiction treatment industry. And boy, did he have fire when he spoke about this stuff. And you talk about somebody that was so full of potential, but I don't know that he had what I had about the right people being around him at the right time. I think, and I feel like that's just such a tragedy that he's gone now. And a lot of it was due to unresolved things that he experienced on that tragic day. And I want to do better by the people who've experienced what he experienced. I want to be a part of the solution for those people so that not all need to choose to do what he did and what Crystal's doing, use their voices to advocate. If that's a part of the recovery journey, you better believe I'll shoulder up and be right there with you, because I know you said you're not an expert, Crystal, but you actually are. You are the trusted voice here in the bridge that makes it even possible for people like me to be in this conversation. And not only are you an expert because you were there and you lived through it and have survived it, but you also, frankly, I can talk specifically to you, you are well studied, my friend. I'm impressed with not only the work that you've done for you, but also the education that you bring to other people. So I want to be there for people who have survived that tragedy and turn it into a triumphant experience so that they can live into their best lives. Not, it's not because of what happened to them or in spite of what happened to them, but because it's what they've done with it. And I just want to give people more opportunities to that. So because I lost Austin, that led to connecting with some other friends, which eventually got us connected with Crystal. And I run an organization called Onsite. We partner with an incredible organization called the Onsite Foundation, and we started a program called Triumph Over Tragedy, which Crystal can tell you more about. But we've just taken our first, how many people were in the first program?
40 in March.
Yeah, we took our first 40 survivors of mass shootings through a 1-week program and just wrapped them up in a significant amount of hospitality and love, but also put some of the smartest trauma practitioners out there with them to guide them through this journey. And through the Onsite Foundation did all that free of charge. And we're just getting started. That's just one thing we want to do. But through the Triumph Over Tragedy mission, there is so much we want to do for the survivor community to turn that community into having the opportunity that they've always deserved, which is to thrive. So that's the reason you asked. That's a long way for me to say, Lisa, that's why I'm here. And even though I told Crystal, I said, I've only got a short window, you can tell how much I love this. I mean, I could spend an hour on here. So it's probably good I am going to tune out or I would talk too much.
Oh, I am so grateful. And I love the passion. And one thing I love what you said is that what Crystal went through and what Dylan went through. I think that's one thing that I really have gained is compassion for every aspect of the tragedy. And understanding that we need to open our hearts to all and be a safe place. Like I saw you in your interviews, a safe place for people to come and say, I am troubled. I am struggling. I don't have questions. I used to have faith. I don't have faith now, or whatever. And if we could learn to be people who made people feel safe and made them safe, we would really make a beautiful world. So thank you for your work and just blessings all around. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Happy to be here.
So much, Miles.
Yeah, thank
Crystal.
you. Crystal, thank you. All right, take care, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye, Miles.
That's a hard act to follow. You do things together. I'm like, I don't want to go after Miles.
So Crystal, I think one of my friends might have participated in the on-site event in March.
Is that right?
Yeah, Marcus Weaver.
Yes, he's a part of our board.
Yep, he's an amazing. That's like my brother. And so when he started talking, and then he talked about the week taking them away, I was like, we were in conversation. I was on his way to the airport. We were talking, and he's like, I'm going to lose my cell phone, but we were working on some things here in Denver. So yeah, I vividly remember his experience and what that meant to him when he returned. So
Marcus is a brother to me as well, and a friend. And the work that he's doing, even here in Colorado, is amazing. And so knowing that you guys are friends, it makes me love you all the more. But you know what? I really wanted to speak to what you just said there at the end of the call, or at the end of with Miles there, was kind of understanding all aspects, of tragedy, but specifically the Columbine tragedy. I really wanted to speak to just the bravery and the courage of Sue Klebold. When the first time I watched the film, I've watched it now a handful of times, and the first time I watched it, just because I was at Columbine, I was there. I listened to the words that Dylan spoke. I was right there, at the hands of what was taking place, and not for a single second as I was watching that film did I feel any anger or bitterness or frustration with Sue. I had such compassion and such empathy I just have so much respect for that woman and the bravery that it took to sit in front of the camera, to tell her story, to tell such intimate, sacred pieces of her and Dylan's story. And it just struck me, just as a mother myself of children, just this idea that it feels like it's an indictment on you when something goes wrong with a kid, something that's beyond your control. And it feels like something you've done has gone wrong or you failed in some way. And I just don't believe that that's the case with Sue. And I believe that she just exemplifies beauty and grace. And the fact that she has turned her story around and she's using it to help educate others is literally the most beautiful work that somebody can do. And I just resonated with her story. I too lost a son, not in the same way that she lost Dylan, but I lost a son. And just the loss of a child, there is nothing like that kind of loss, the void, the emptiness that leaves. And so just the compassion that I had for her. And I remember something stuck with me and still to this day has stuck with me. Sue prayed, she said, God, just take out Dylan, just take Dylan so that he doesn't hurt anybody else. And I believe that was a prayer that saved my life that day. And when Sue, a few years back, when she started, she wrote her book and she came out and did a TED Talk and was doing a lot of media, I tracked her down, I found her email, and I actually wrote her an email. And I explained to Sue, I just said, Sue, I know that you loved Dylan fiercely, and I believe that Dylan knew that. I believe that he knew that, and you did the best that you could. I just expressed my sadness and my hurt over the pain and the anger and the hatred that she's had to endure for so many years. I expressed my sadness that Dylan felt so outcasted and marginalized, undervalued and unheard, that this is that he was looking for a way out. And I expressed to her just how deeply I care for her. And I remember watching the film all over again and feeling those same feelings, wishing I could be sitting across from Sue, getting to know her story, getting to know her even more, because I was just blown away by just that bravery and that courage. That takes an amazing human to do something like that. So again, thank you even for telling her story in such a redemptive way as well. I know Sue has had a long journey personally, and this is a piece of her story and a huge piece of her story, but you told it with such compassion, such tenderness, and you really told it in such a sacred way. And so thank you for just allowing us to understand. We all have stories. We can't understand when we look at another person. I don't understand Jose's story, but I can't wait to get to know Jose, and the stories that we have. It's really difficult to dislike someone if you know their story, if you understand where they've come from. And so thank you for that, and just to kind of, I think, give you guys a little context about my story. I mean, I know you saw the clip there at the beginning, but I just wanted to kind of briefly share just where I was that day and a little bit of my experience. And of course, there's a whole lot more to it, as you know, but kind of in a nutshell, I really do believe that in our lives that there are defining moments, that they can be fleeting but they're defining moments nonetheless, because as a result, our lives are left forever changed. And as a result, we have this choice to either shrink back in fear or we can push forward in faith and in hope. And for me, that choice came when I was just 16 years old. I was a junior at Columbine High School. And at that time, at 16 years old, the greatest concern for me at that time was fitting in, was having friends, was being smart and popular and playing sports. And I always felt like I was just average, like I could do none of those things exceptionally well, but I was just kind of sliding by. And that's a really hard thing for a teenager because you want to be great. And I just felt like I was always just not quite good enough. I got good grades, but I felt like I had to work harder than everybody else. And I played sports, but I was not the MVP. I was like one with the best smile or best attitude, not really what you're looking for when you're playing sports, and really just always looking for more popularity, more. And on April 20th, 1999, I would discover what really matters, what's really most important in life. And I remember that morning I woke up and I knew that something was strange about the day. In fact, I remember thinking that there was something bad that was going to happen. I know that sounds strange, but that thought was gone as quickly as it came. And I got ready for the day. Of course, I was late, as I always was. And as I was driving to school that day, I realized that I had a really important test that I had to study for. And I didn't have much margin in my day, but I knew that I had my lunch hour. So I determined I would go to the library to study, but went on with the morning, and everything seemed pretty normal. I think there were warning signs, kind of odd occurrences now looking back, but I didn't pay attention to those. Nobody did. Why would we? Because no one knew what was about to happen. Excuse me. And I just remember there was just a lot of excitement in the air because we had prom the weekend before. And I even had one of those old disposable camera, and I was taking pictures because I wanted to finish off the roll from prom and get it developed. That kind of gives you some context of time, right?
Yes.
But I was taking pictures, and someone even said, "Hey, Crystal, what are you doing? This isn't the last day of school. Why are you taking pictures?" And now looking back at comments like that, I thought, man, that is really bizarre. And about 11:15, the lunch bell rang, and my friends and I typically went out to eat because we had an open campus and could kind of come and go as we pleased. But on this day, I convinced two of my friends by the name of Seth and Sarah to come with me to the library so that I could study. And they agreed. They really didn't push back on that at all. And so we showed up to the library, and typically the library was filled with so many students, making it kind of difficult to find a place to sit. But we chose a table in the center section of the library because it was more empty that day. And we had only been there a couple of minutes, just unpacking, kind of settling in, catching up on one another's days. And suddenly there was just chaos that broke out in and around the school. And I remember looking to the hallway, and I saw students running with looks of panic and terror on their faces. And it looked as though they were running away from something, but I couldn't exactly see what it was. And about that time, Seth kind of jumped up and he went over the windows that overlooked the back of our school to see if anything was happening. He came back and he said, "Hey, nothing to worry about. I'm sure it's a senior prank. I'm sure it's some kind of something for drama club." And I really wanted to believe Seth, and I think Seth wanted to believe Seth. But a teacher came running through the doors, and she was screaming at us. She said, "Get under your tables. There's boys. They're shooting guns. They have bombs. Hide under your tables." And at the same time, she was calling the police to tell them to come quickly. We really didn't know what to do or how to respond because nothing like this had really ever happened. I mean, a few small things in the peripheral, but nothing to this magnitude. And so we did so. We kind of got underneath of our tables that didn't offer a whole lot of protection, kind of pulled in the chairs as closely as we could. And I remember Seth, just kind of holding on to me, just kind of sheltering my body with his own. And just down the hall, we started to hear loud explosions and popping noises, and they were coming closer and they were getting louder. And I knew deep down that they were headed for the library. And I think Seth really realized the same thing in that moment because he said to me, "Crystal, I promise that I will take a bullet for you." And when he said those words to me, I knew that I wasn't going to make it out of there alive. I knew that at 16 years old, I was facing the reality of my own death. And so I did the only thing I could think to do. I cried out and I said, "God, if you're real, God, make us invisible. Get us out of here. I'll quit partying. I'll quit drinking." I was making a lot of really poor choices at that point. And I said, "God, just give me a second chance and my life is yours." And with that, the two killers came into the room and they screamed at all of us, "Everybody get out, get out, get out, get up from underneath of your tables." And of course, none of us did. And they, for the next 7.5 minutes, began their killing rampage. And those 7.5 minutes felt like an eternity. It felt like time absolutely stood still. And I remember it really was kind of what they talk about, your life flashing before your eyes. I saw all my past choices that I had made, wishing I had a do-over. I saw my hopes and my dreams for my future literally slipping through my fingers, knowing those dreams would never be realized. I saw faces of my family and friends that I loved so dearly, but at 16, never told them how much I loved or cared about them. you think you're invincible. You think you have every day for the rest of your life to share those messages. And I just kind of closed my eyes and I waited and I listened to the horror unfold for those 7 minutes as they gunned down their victims based on the way that they looked, the color of their skin, if they were overweight, if they wore glasses. They were even targeting students, asking them if they believed in God, and pulling the trigger, killing them when they answered yes. And at one point, as I was huddled there with Seth, I heard one of them yell out, "Hey, you in the white hat." And I remembered Seth was wearing a white hat, and he pulled it off and he held it there between us. And I just remembered waiting for a bullet to go through him and then through me. But nothing happened. The shooting just continued, and I was filled with so much panic and so much fear, every fiber of my body just shaking uncontrollably, the strobe lights going off and the fire alarms just raging. And I couldn't even breathe. I was so afraid to take my next breath because I didn't know what the next moment would hold. And at that point, I was actually chewing a piece of gum. And it's so distinct because I remember reaching into my mouth and thinking it wasn't a matter of if, but when I got shot, I didn't want to choke on my gum. So I took it out and I thought, okay, now I'm safe. At least when I get shot, I'm not going to choke. And with that, the two boys began making their way up the center section, and they were pushing in chairs to get through. They had already killed several people behind us in the section. And they first turned to the table that was right next to us, just a few feet away. And they were mocking him, making fun of him because he wore glasses, and they ended his life. And then they turned their attention to our table and they pushed a chair in underneath, and my body was lying right where they were standing, their boots just inches from my body. And I just remember I could feel them standing there. I could hear their voices so clearly. And they were using our table to kind of collect inventory of what was left of their weapons and their guns, and kind of realized they were running low. And one of them took out a knife and said, I've always wanted to stab someone to death. And so just kind of waited for a new variation of my death at that point. And as I clenched my body and kind of waited for death to come, nothing happened. They said they were going to go reload and they were going to come back, but they promised to kill those of us who are still alive. And so for the first time in what seemed like forever, the shooting stopped, and it gave us a quick opportunity to get up and escape before they returned. And Sarah and I stayed under the table, still holding on to one another. We had been safe up until that moment. But Seth realized we weren't behind him. He came back, he pulled us from the table, and he said, run, leave everything behind, just get out of here as quickly as possible. We ran towards the exit. It looked like a war zone had taken place in there. And I remember still holding my gun, thinking it's holding me back. It was like that nightmare where you can't run and you can't scream and you can't move. And I dropped it and I took off outside. And just a few yards from the school, there was a police car. There were no police officers, just mostly students who had been very badly wounded. And there was just pools of blood and people writhing in pain and ripping off clothes to put pressure on people's wounds. And I just lost control. I became hysterical and I was screaming and I was hyperventilating and really close to actually feeling like I was having a heart attack because everything was shutting down. I couldn't use my body. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. And police began coming and taking the most wounded away. And I was separated from Seth and Sarah, dropped off in a field just behind Columbine, just kind of left cemented in a place. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to trust. I had lost my friends. And a camera came and they started asking me questions. And that was the clip that is in American Tragedy as I'm crying and I'm trying to figure out, and so many people that were left in the school, so many people that were there lying on the floor. And I hadn't even begun to process, and wouldn't for quite some time, everything that I had experienced in there. But later we came to find out that the library was the scene of the most intense violence that day, that 10 of the 13 were killed inside of the library, also Dylan and Eric, and 12 of the 24 were wounded there in the library as well. And so, just have learned a lot of lessons from that time and learned a lot of things. But I think one of the things I've learned is that we never know the character that we possess or the resiliency that is within us until we're faced with something like that. And, as I said, it's been quite a journey. It's been quite just a amazing 21 years. And obviously I would have avoided it if possible, but in doing so, I would have of not seeing the ways that it's impacted, the ways that it has changed my life, the ways that it has given me the opportunity to choose hope every single day. And that's why it was my defining moment, because really that was a gift that I was given right there, that I could either choose to give up, to be bitter and angry and kind of throw in the towel on the rest of my life, or I could choose to live. I could choose hope. And for me, I didn't feel like there was another option. I couldn't change what had happened to me, but what I could do is change how I was going to respond to it. And so that's a little bit of a nutshell, kind of been my journey. And I started almost immediately speaking, writing, just sharing a message. And for me, I always wanted to share a message of hope, but also it was one of urgency to see these things end. But as school shootings and mass shootings in general started to become more commonplace, and they started to really increase with such intensity, I kind of started to step into more of an advocacy role where I was really trying to be there to respond to other people who had gone through something similar to what myself and my community had gone through. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to hope for so long. Hey, maybe my message is making a difference. Oh, wait, it doesn't seem to be making a difference at all. And now I'm trying to respond to all these other people. And as Jose and I were talking about before the call, to be a part of a club that none of us wish that any of us would ever have to be a part of. And that is what this club is, this ever-growing club of survivors. And, last year in 2019, there were more mass shootings than there were days of the year. And I know that resulted in some 400 plus deaths in 2019 alone. So if you think about those statistics, you think everyone you know will be affected by mass shooting in some way or another. But my heart is right now, okay, what about those who already have? You think about Route 91 in Las Vegas, Nevada, and you think about the fact that 22,000 people were there immediately impacted by this life-altering trauma. And that doesn't even begin to include the secondary trauma of friends and families of those individuals. I mean, it's just, those numbers are absolutely astonishing. And so that was, as I said, for a long time, I was speaking, I was traveling, I was writing, doing all of these things. But as an individual, your reach is only so far, your platform only so far reaching. And so I was able to link arms with the Onsite Foundation and brilliant, amazing, compassionate professionals such as Miles and so many others, and to link arms to do something greater. And that's kind of really the vision behind Triumph Over Tragedy. I personally have seen many of acquaintances and friends lose their lives to addiction, to suicide. And Miles even spoke earlier of our common friend, Austin Eubanks. And, watching what happened with Austin's life. Austin, he was also in the library with me, and he was injured and he lost his best friend. And because of his injuries and his emotional pain, he developed an opioid addiction. And even as Miles stated, he was an incredible, remarkable individual with such a message, and he was making such an impact in the world. And to ultimately see him succumb to that addiction was heartbreaking. And I too felt compelled to do something. And there is no coincidence that brought Miles and myself and Laura and everybody who is a part of the Onsite Foundation and a part of Triumph Over Tragedy together at the perfect time. I believe so much of my work since Columbine is really a culmination of what we're seeing now. And so Triumph Over Tragedy was birthed, and Triumph Over Tragedy is a week-long therapeutic, it's a trauma-informed therapeutic program where people can come, and it's designed specifically, curated for survivors of mass violence, to have this emotional wellness kind of education, trauma information, coupled with a variety of different modalities, using some of the most incredible experts in the field of trauma, but also using community, because we believe that healing takes place in the context of community, that we can offload our pain when we are in community with one another. And so that is what Triumph Over Tragedy is. And as you heard Miles say, it's completely free, it's scholarshiped, so that everybody has access to the kind of help that they deserve, regardless of their race, of their gender, of their socioeconomic status. Because I know for me personally, I had an amazing trauma therapist. I had amazing help at my fingertips and resources, but it's alarming how many people do not have access to the same thing, who do not have the even just the funds to be able to get this kind of help. And so that's why we believe it's so important to create a new ripple effect. For far too long, we have seen the ripple effect of death and of destruction. And so we want to see a new ripple effect, one of hope, one of emotional freedom, one of just something that creates change, even as you were talking about, Lisa, a new, beautiful existence for people. Because honestly, until we know better, we can't do better. And so each of us, we each learn, and then each one teaches one. And so I love that model, that as we learn to get emotionally healthy ourselves, then we get to pass that on to other people in our spheres of influence, whether that's at our homes, whether that's in our workplace, in our communities, in our schools. We really can't even grasp how big and how far we can reach, with that. And so anyway, we had, as Miles said, back in March, we had 40 survivors come. And it was, I experienced courage on a grand scale. I mean, I saw these 40 survivors come and show up, because I believe that courage isn't the absence of fear or even discomfort, but it's looking that fear and that discomfort in the face and saying, not today. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the hard work. I'm going to let the walls and the defenses come down, and I'm going to press in and do the hard work. And it's hard. It's hard, but it's so worth it. And we've seen this in so many people who are a part of this program. Some of them have said they feel like themselves for the first time in a long time. Some of them just say they feel for the first time in a long time. You know how amazing that is, just to feel again and not to feel numb. And some of them say they have a renewed sense of hope and purpose and meaning as a result of the program. And others say, hey, we've got a long way to go, but now we have resources and we have tools and we have community to do that with. And I think that is such a beautiful gift, that we're not the end all be all to healing from trauma of a mass shooting. We're a stepping stone to in that journey, and everybody's journey is different. It looks different, but it's just kind of to be the first stepping stone or a part of the continuation of that healing process. And so it's such a high honor for me to be the chairperson of our Survivor Council, but also just to continue creating a better and better program for survivors everywhere, because this is just the beginning. It's not the end, as you said, Lisa. This is just the beginning for us. But I also think it lends itself to what we're talking about in the film, is that yes, we know so much about trauma. We know the research, we know the effects of trauma on the brain and on the body, and we know it can be healed. There's such hope in just knowing that trauma can be healed, but we also know that there are preventative measures that we can be taking right here and right now so that we can make great strides together and seeing, just less of this trauma altogether affecting people on a global scale.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, powerful. Just so powerful, Crystal. I'm sitting here just thinking about, I keep going back to this string of story of hope and beauty, right? That we can actually find triumph over tragedy. And when you do, your life story becomes that of hope and beauty, right? I think that's, we had a viewer question that came in that they were at Route 91 and we were short on time, but I wanted to honor that. They said, what can one person do? I've been on the side of tragedies and I want to give comfort. There has to be more to do. And I think you've just illustrated so beautifully how to get engaged, how to find your entry point, how to find your community, connect to those individuals. But more importantly, I think it's doing that work, right? Finding the resources, finding your community. As Miles said, he had the right people around him. And so I think being vulnerable to find those right people. And so we want to just thank you so very much. And we want to thank Miles so very much, and Lisa. And as we always say, that in order to accomplish all of what you've talked about and all of what American Tragedy seeks us to do, we must commit to brain fit for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for our communities. And I think it starts with who we are in our story of hope and beauty. So please, everybody, subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Tragedy. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And Crystal, thank you so very much. Onward and forward, and keep telling your story because you're changing lives.
And I want to just give a little advertisement for tomorrow. It is going to be a paradigm shift from some of the top professionals. So Crystal, you would love it. So Tom Insel is the past president of the National Institute for Mental Health. And Sarah Davidon works here in Colorado with Children Policy. And they both have been really wondering what needs to change. And they both have come up with almost the same answer. And it's the answer that we have got to teach how to live life, not just how to deal with mental illness or tragedies. We've got to start at a different point and an earlier point, and it'll be hopeful. And this is from the top down that we need to, and from the down up, all of us need to be doing this. So come tomorrow. It'll start at 8:30 Eastern time, 6:30 Mountain Standard Time. And Crystal, love you. Thank you.
Love you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
So much.
Good night.